I'm gonna do this. Are you ready? Okay, cool. We're gonna start a little early, sorry. But Greg is a principal cloud security researcher with Lacework Labs, where he focuses on large-scale data science and threat research intending to help secure customers' cloud environments. Foss has led the research team, built and ran a global security operations program, consulted in red teaming, and worked as security analyst for the federal government in previous roles, and is all around a great person in the community. I added that. In his free time, he spends time with his wife, 2 children, and is an avid runner and swimmer. So please welcome the keynote today, Greg Foss.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. There's power there too. Yeah, some power. Perfect.
I think this is the first conference I've ever been to I don't need an adapter. This is amazing.
Try it.
This is unheard of. You guys are too prepared. All right, let's see if, oh, there we go. All right, perfect. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. Man, I can't even begin to express how nice it is to actually be in person for this event. I can remember talking to you guys when you were first planning this, 3 years ago. And then all of a sudden, everything changed and we had to go online, and you guys did that and, actually converted very successfully, when we all had no clue what was going on. So props to you guys, and especially pulling this together, getting us all back together here this year. So let's give a round of applause to all the organizers. Such a great event. Yeah. Man, talk about a venue too. This is cool. This is way too fancy. I'm here to class it down a bit. So be perfect. Well, so, this talk, the fun part of the keynote is I didn't have to submit an abstract, so this is going to be like an amalgamation of random stuff that I just find very interesting, so hopefully you do as well. And so, Aaron's introduced me. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a principal cloud security researcher with Lacework. I'm also an advisor at multiple startups, a couple of them here in Colorado, which I'm very happy about. But all of that I think is, on the surface, the job, fun stuff. But I think one of the more fun parts of what I do nowadays is working with a lot of people who are getting into the space and trying to mentor people who are trying to learn and grow and come out into this industry, because it's a hard industry. And so that's why I'm going to start with, why are all of us here, right, on a Saturday? Why are we spending our time working, trying to learn about how to do our jobs better, how to secure things better? And I think it comes down to one thing, at least for me. We're all pretty passionate about this, right? This is something that's important to us that I think, we would probably do. At least I know I would probably do this even if I wasn't being paid for it. So I think that's why a lot of us are dedicating our free time over the weekend when we could be at home doing whatever to being out here learning. And so, I applaud all of you who've come out here to listen to me ramble. Because I think it really speaks volumes to, how passionate and important, these people in this room are to this industry. Because it's hard. Many of you guys know AJ, good friend of a lot of us here. And I found this quote really good. I think he hits the nail on the head. Starting in cybersecurity is very hard. It's not an easy field. I talk to a lot of people who want to come into this field because there's money in it and stuff like that. And I always tell them, cool, go to sales or something, because you're going to burn out if you're not actually interested in this, you're not actually willing to go above and beyond, because that's what it takes to be really good at this, especially nowadays, We have had our world shifted, all of us, and all of us in this room are much more fortunate than a lot of people who didn't have the ability to go work from home and go log in and just, work on the computer all day. So it affected a lot of people in a lot of significant ways. Now we're dealing with a whole other kind of tumultuous times. We have the war going on, which is affecting a lot of things. Our economy now, we're definitely seeing that impact there, and people's lives are being shifted. And then, of course, terrible mass shooting just about every day in Colorado. All of this is really affecting a lot of things, and not just in the personal lives, but cybersecurity as well is all going to be impacted by all of these events, especially as it starts impacting the economy. As we saw recently, there's been a lot of companies affected, a lot of individuals affected by this. Our company as well recently had to lay some great people off. It's unfortunate. And if you haven't seen the site, it's pretty eye-opening, layoffs.fyi. Man, there's a ton of companies out there that have cut a lot of very, very good people recently. A lot of companies that have completely gone under. And, it's kind of a heavy way to start this talk. I promise it's not all like this. But it does lead into the main topic I do want to hit on, which is cybercrime. For years we've had so many people focus solely on advanced persistent threats and all that kind of stuff. But the thing is, like, most companies cannot detect or prevent cybercrime. Basic script kiddie stuff is getting by just about most companies that a lot of us who work with a lot of different companies see on a daily basis. So that's kind of the focus I want to talk about today is cybercrime in general. And really centering around how technology and some of the improvements that are being made in sort of the whole underground scene are making it easily, much more accessible for people who might not have been into cybercrime before. So, what am I actually talking about here? Well, how many of you have heard from many people that my business doesn't do anything important? We're not going to be impacted by hackers. We don't have sensitive data. Like, all the time people say that. They're like, we're a school, we're, whatever, we're hosting, provider, streaming, we do these kind of things. The thing is, hackers are very opportunistically driven. A lot of this is just gaining infrastructure, gaining ground, so that they can perform other attacks down the line. So when you look at all these different types of businesses, I really like showing people how attackers view their business. And it's eye-opening to some people. Schools, this is a prime target for emails, and emails from educational institutions get by a lot of filters. Very prime target, and we'll actually show some numbers about why this is so key in a bit. Hosting, of course, anonymous infrastructure. If you can compromise assets, you can stage your malware, your command and control infrastructure on other people's computers, kind of gets you in the clear a bit. What about streaming? Well, that seems like a good denial of service platform to me. E-commerce? How many people have heard of MageCart? The credit card skimmers, injecting JavaScript, stealing credit cards when people are paying for things online. Social media? Anyone here do red teaming? That's the first place we go. We're trying to figure out who to target, who's going to have access to things. Everything's out there now. You don't even have to do much work to figure out what tools the company uses, who works there, and everything else in between. Image hosting, well, you can store your malware there. You can store payloads. Sometimes steganography, if you want to do hidden messages and that kind of stuff. Big one that's scared me recently is these managed service providers. Pivot points. All of them have access into companies. They have credentials. They're whitelisted, all these things where you're already purposefully putting blind spots into what they do because you don't want to trip your alarms because these people are logging in anyways through legitimate means. Perfect avenue for attackers. And we've seen that come to fruition recently in a couple very prominent attacks. Just setting the stage with, these are the kind of things we should be telling people when they say they don't think they're a target, because everyone is. Even personal accounts, right? Anyone see this tweet when it came out? Brutal. Brutal, right? Especially for those of us in cloud security. This is happening every single day to people. And hopefully not at this scale. Like there's a thing called guardrails that you can put in AWS. So all of a sudden, if your systems are going haywire and your billing is going through the roof, you can at least stop it. But pretty scary. I mean, this guy, ended up being charged $45,000 for someone going into their systems and installing crypto miners. The real kicker here, too, is the attacker only made like $800 from this attack, which, I mean, man. But if you're using someone else's computers, like the cost benefit doesn't matter. We've even seen some where people are spinning up lambdas that do like crypto mining. Even more exponentially, costs that come along with that. But also incredibly inefficient. I don't know why they would even do that. There's a lot more better uses for lambdas for attackers, but still. Oh, that's a good. Oh, man. That's a very good point. I think that's like 25 cents today, so it's even worse, man. That's a very good point. Well, and so, that brings us to, IC3 always tracks the losses associated with these types of attacks. And I always like just showing the scale at which these crimes are very successful. And these are just the ones that are known and reported to these institutions. There's a lot more that don't even fall into, these lists here. But as you can see, just last year, the total was $6.9 billion in losses due to cybercrime in general. Now, this kind of encompasses everything. This isn't just one type of cybercrime or another, but significant amount of money being lost here every single day, and every year it's just about doubling. And they're expecting this to double again this year, which is terrifying. So one of the real kind of core components of this is business email compromise. Business email compromise is one of the most successful by far forms of attacks that we're seeing today. Business email compromise alone accounted for 2.4 billion losses in 2021. And that's just what's known, right? And that's from businesses, let alone the personal impact, personal accounts that are targeted. Because this affects everyone in different ways. Basically just, committing scams, trying to get people to send money. And it's crazy to think that this much money can be generated a lot from like gift cards and things like that. Some of these companies that do those types of attacks end up making just hundreds of $1 million just their single company in a year. And they have little like actual businesses that do like cold calling and stuff like that, but then they also have these illegitimate factions so that when they're audited, they can point to, here's our legitimate business, and they have everyone else kind of hide what they're actually doing in that other side of the building. But oftentimes they're trying to go for large transfers of money in one time. Really trying to get people to transfer money out of the company just by submitting fake forms for purchase orders and things of that nature, and then targeting individuals for gift card scams. I mean, like all of us are affected. Who in here knows someone who's been affected by a gift card scam and fell for it? Quite a few people. I have family members that have fallen for it. And the sad thing is, we always find out about it too late. They tell us after the fact, after they've already sent like $3,000 in cards to somebody. So it's sad. It's a very kind of terrible scheme that affects people, especially the most vulnerable people. And then romance scams. This is a whole other level of evil. These people are terrible. The scams they commit, some of these go on for years. A few of us were just at a conference where someone dove very deep into this, and it kind of opened my eyes to just kind of how terrible some of these people are. To the extent of, some of them are actually practicing juju and committing very crazy ritualistic kind of things with money and stuff like that in order to ensure their scams are successful. Really kind of interesting when you look at like the people behind this. So there's one group, if you want to learn more about this, called the Yahoo Boys, who it's kind of terrifying when you look into like what they do in order to ensure their scams are successful in these kind of juju rituals and things like that. But there's a lot of documentaries out there where you can look into and learn more about this. But business email compromise is one of the biggest problems I think our industry is kind of facing today. But the stats from it are pretty interesting, right? So one of the things we've been doing is collecting a lot of the numbers for what's for sale on online forums. So one of the things I like doing is going and scraping this content and automating the collection of seeing, what's for sale, what's the dollar value, how much is out there. And the real interesting thing here, we were talking about educational institutions. You can see they made up 35% of email compromises that were for sale. So this is basically someone gains access to an email account or a set of email accounts or even entire companies' email servers, and then offers these up for sale online. And over here you can see the pricing as well based on each essentially provider. But what's real interesting here is those educational institutions, there's a lot of reasons behind it. They kind of market it as like you can get discounts on things, it gets by spam filters, all of those kind of things that lead to it being one of the more prominent items for sale on these forums. But of course, the pricing is very cheap. For around $5 to $10, you can purchase access to someone's email account. And then you can use that for whatever you want. You can go through their list of contacts, you can spam all them, you can use this to target other companies and things like that. Just infinite kind of uses that attackers will find just for email accounts. And these are very abundant if you look, if you do any crimeware research. The big one, I think, that I really want to highlight, with this whole talk, right, is just like these cybercrime markets have really changed the game over the last few years, lowering the bar, making it so people who have no clue what they're doing have access to these tools and techniques and resources in order to commit some pretty serious crimes. Right now you could purchase these emails, you could purchase access to systems, you can rent access to a ransomware service, you can rent a command and control server. You don't have to know anything about how to launch these attacks or do anything. They come with step-by-step guides. We saw recently with the Conti leaks, they actually had a training program for onboarding new people, and they even told them that this was like a legitimate job and people didn't really realize until they were there. So they had a very high turnover because of that, which is kind of hilarious. But when you look at these groups, a lot of them operate like legitimate businesses. They have someone at the top. They have people, kind of directors running different parts of the operation. And I think the Conti leaks is one that really highlights this because due to the war going on in Ukraine right now, they were split, right? They had one group that was in Russia, and they all of a sudden came out publicly and said, we support Russia, and we're going to, attack Americans or anyone who, goes against Russia. And then the Ukrainians over there, also team members, were like, fuck that, we're going to dox all your stuff online. And they did. And so we got to learn a lot about how these groups operate in terms of business structure. So it's real interesting, but the scary thing for us is like this really lowers the bar and makes it easy for a lot of people to get into this space who might otherwise not be able to, or not have the knowledge to do so. Which brings me to initial access brokers. You hear of initial access brokers. These are essentially these groups that, or individuals mostly, that go and compromise assets. They're, as the name states, their main goal is just gaining access to things, whether it's personal resources, corporate resources, things of that nature. And then they just turn around and sell it online, often for very cheap. Some of these you can buy access to, personal assets for around $10. This has been going on for a long time. The big part, the big change, I think, is the resale of corporate access. We've seen that going for, many thousands of dollars, depending on the company. We even saw a few years ago, there were 3 different antivirus firms that were offered up for sale online, access into their environment. They also sold their source code, which is also a very common happening in these groups. So what do these look like, right? They come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes and forms. You can see this one. This was initially posted in 2018. This group is still operating, by the way, the Genesis store. They just keep shifting infrastructure and whatnot. But essentially, they sell access in a lot of different ways. They'll have browser fingerprinting. They'll have logs that have been exfiltrated from environments. They'll have just straight credentials, remote desktop, SSH, things like that. And sometimes they'll even just have RATs where you can just log into systems that are shelled, especially web servers, the web shells, where they'll provide credentials to access. And the breakdown of these is kind of interesting. This is a different store. This is a dedicated actual marketplace. And you can see the breakdown of the assets that they have for sale. Quite a few assets as well. So cPanel access into various servers. Leads, that's commonly emails. So that's like email lists. And leads are basically what spammers will take so they have a target list to go after. SSH, RDP, SMTP is the big one because then they can relay their spam. They can do all sorts of things that allow them to commit, more acts of fraud and things of that nature. But it just, goes down from there. And this is only growing. Every time we find one of these stores or one gets taken down, like 5 more pop up. And so it's actually become like a full-time job just trying to trace all of these and keep on top of them because they're always changing and they're always improving and there's always new up-and-coming stores that are coming out with more and more offerings at cheaper rates. But the big one I'm real interested in, coming from Lacework, is these cloud providers access. So, essentially selling access into AWS, GCP, Azure, things like that, giving them access to the management plane itself. And the funny thing is, attackers have no clue how to properly leverage this. They just go deploy crypto miners and stuff. But that's the thing I think will change over time as people start getting more familiar with the capabilities of what is possible when you access cloud environments directly, which is kind of scary. But these marketplaces are real interesting. This is kind of what one of them looks like. So you can see here, they give you a breakdown of kind of what assets are for sale. So this is a remote desktop protocol market. And basically, they give you information on, does this have admin rights? Is this blacklisted from, already spamming and that kind of stuff? What's the operating system version? They even give you a couple octets of the IP address, which is interesting. What country, and all that kind of stuff. And all of these forums, or all these marketplaces, essentially run kind of in the same format as this. And you can see very cheap to purchase access to these systems. Because then you get into this compromised asset, and you basically, now have a clean system where you can go and commit more acts of crime from. And so that's something we're seeing growing exponentially just about every day. Now, when we started looking at, who is selling these and where, what the pricing is, what was real interesting, we were looking into RDP. We found Amazon was actually the #1 compromised cloud, at least management type of assets that were for sale for RDP, which surprised me. I would have guessed Azure first and foremost, but apparently tons of people use AWS to run Windows, which is just kind of funny to me. But interesting thing here, when you look at the pricing, most of these assets are available between $5 and $10. These ones that are much more expensive, that kind of skews it. Those are usually corporate access, which kind of really extends the price on these. But still relatively cheap. This one I think was $300 to gain access to a corporate system within a corporate infrastructure. Now, SSH offered up much in the same way, but a lot more variability, a lot of different providers. As you might have guessed with this one, DigitalOcean, by far and away #1 provider. I like to call it a provider at least. Because how many people in here have done any IR and not come across a DigitalOcean server? Right? So something about it, the attackers love it just as much as the customers. So. And AWS, of course, this one makes more sense to me than the RDP. But, those two make up about half of the assets that are offered up for sale. So just real kind of interesting, breakdown of, what's for sale, the pricing, things like that. And we did do a lot deeper dive into this. So if you want, I can give you a link to our report where we kind of covered this in more detail. If you want to dig into some of these stats and learn more about kind of how these operate.
Did you purchase some of these cross-reference?
Let's talk when it's not recorded. And yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing, right? So operating in this, it is a good question because, what line is safe to cross when researching these kind of things, and that's something, we try and stay above board when doing this. But man, like there's a lot that can be learned should, access be purchased and things like that. But it's one of those things we have to weigh the costs of like, do we want to risk ourselves and stuff? Because contrary to popular belief, cryptocurrency is not at all private, and it's extremely easily traceable, even through tumblers now. Some of the tumblers are actually operated by some of the companies that do tracing. So take that for what you will. When you do some of this research, you always want to be very careful, make sure you're never touching anything from your direct IP, all of those kind of things to make sure you're not implicated. Because just recently, very popular forum, the RAID forums, primarily was like script kiddies and stuff for a long time, but then they started having some heavy content on there. There was Alibaba access to their systems was offered up on there, and not just for sale, they just leaked everything. So once these really high profile sort of breaches ended up on there, all of a sudden it caught the Fed's attention, and now that server is taken down. The kid who was running it is in jail, and he was a kid too, which is kind of fitting, given that the whole site, if you ever looked at it, is weird. You got like a default anime kind of picture for your profile. Real interesting site. But essentially, now it's taken down, the federal law enforcement actually operated it as a honeypot for a couple months in that kind of interim when they took it over. So, all of these, when you're investigating these, be very careful. But back to how these are offered for sale. What we're looking at here is this is a bot that I wrote to just automatically collect all of this data. And so when new systems show up for sale online, we get alerts in Slack to notify us about these. And we get pricing data and all that kind of parsed out and sent to us. So this is just one market. And here you can see, offering up access to AWS credentials. And these are kind of the main ones I tend to alert on, just given our business model and our focus on cloud security. But there's a lot more where this comes from, and it's mixed in. Even in some of these more script kiddie forums, there is some interesting content that gets posted there. But the real interesting stuff is the ones that you have to get into kind of the underground groups, and that's where it comes to, do you have to prove yourself? Do you have to show things? Do you have to purchase access? And then that starts getting into that gray area where it gets a little more concerning. But the hosting account resale, so looking at like all of these cloud providers, pretty interesting. We were guessing AWS would be much higher on this list, but no, HostGator by far and away was one of the main hosting providers offered up for sale. And when we're talking about hosting providers here, I'm looking at like that management plane. So this would be like access to your GoDaddy account and things like that. So Bluehost, made up the other kind of quarter of that. But the pricing for these, extremely cheap, especially WordPress access. I mean, WordPress sites are compromised, like there's probably 10 that got popped just in the last 5 minutes. And so, a lot of the investigations all of us do, we go back to, oh, this was on a WordPress site, compromised, hosting malware, all that kind of stuff. But, for those that don't have like web hacking skills or the ability to gain access to these, they can just purchase access, and then they can do what they want with access to these hosting providers. So it's just kind of interesting. This is more data you can check out, within our report if you want to learn more about kind of the breakdown and, the business kind of behind this, like how these attackers operate and things like that. But the funny thing to me is the lack of creativity in all these attackers. All of them just deploy crypto miners. Like Q and I talk about this quite a bit because we track a lot of the same actors, And they all just go in and deploy crypto miners. A lot of their malware is just bash scripts and Python and just basic stuff, not even like encrypted. The most creative is they'll have big base64 encoded strings that will turn into a script and execute. And it's nothing too creative, right? Because all of us are like looking at this from another angle. It's like, man, like what could you do in terms of impact if you're getting access to a cloud environment? So this is one of the things we like to simulate within our lab, is like, what are kind of the scary things that could happen? And so this is one I think is pretty scary. We haven't seen any attackers do this scenario yet, but I think it's a matter of time till people figure it out. They still go after, just encrypting assets directly, like, Linux and Windows servers, and just going the easy route and just encrypting those assets. Lately we've seen VMware targeted in a big way. They get into the ESXi server and just encrypt everything directly. And so, that's one just rampant, like all over the place, happening all the time. Plus with all these new vulnerabilities coming out in their software, it's all too common occurrence. But I want to talk about AWS specifically and S3. So a lot of people do store quite a bit of data in S3. So let's take a look at our little S3 buckets here. I'm going to show you kind of what a ransomware attack on S3 looks like. So right here, we have our, of course, sensitive customer documents, probably in a public S3 bucket to make it more real world applicable, right? But essentially, we have our files and stuff, and let's just test it out. We'll download one of these, make sure we can read this file. So there we go, we got our Viking helmet. I chose a Viking helmet because we have a bunch of Icelandic folks that we work with, and like all about the Viking culture. And so cool, we can get access to our content here. Looks good. Well, let's go ahead and execute our ransomware. Let's say we stole some credentials from a mobile application, which is a very common occurrence as well. Pretty simple attack. Takes not much time to execute, and as you can see, it's just a basic bash script. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm generating a customer managed key, encrypting all of the content on the fly while I transfer it to another bucket. So as it's being transferred, it's actively being encrypted and removed from the previous bucket. Also go through and erase all backups. Now this will work assuming they aren't using the cold storage and things like that. But essentially you can see here's all of the key material that's generated locally. None of this ever touches Amazon servers, so there's no way Amazon can help you with this either. I also downloaded one file just to make sure I could read it during the test. But essentially, when we run this, we have our new ransomware bucket, which is where all of these files have been moved to. So let's refresh this page and see what this looks like now. There we go. So now we have our original bucket still there, but we also have this new one. Oh, weird. Fun fact with this too, if you transfer between zones, it's extremely costly as well. So talk about adding insult to injury. So the only thing left in the original bucket is now a ransom note. So of course the victim can go download this and see, oh great, like where'd everything go? Now there's a ransom note. I have to pay X dollars to this Bitcoin address. So pretty scary scenario. And now, if we go take a look at the new bucket, let me fast forward a bit, we'll see what happens when you actually try and access these resources. So here's the same file we downloaded before. Let's try and download it. Oh, invalid key, not accessible. The only thing you can access within this bucket is the ransom note itself. So, pretty tricky attack, but the scary thing is how easy this is to execute. Partly why I'm surprised we haven't seen adversaries do this, given just how open a lot of these S3 buckets are, and how easily this attack can be executed. So as you can see, they could access the ransom note. So pretty scary, right? There's no way to really recover from this without paying that ransom. Unless you do have cold storage and you do have your files actually backed up, which we know everyone does that, right? All these people we talk to, they're very good about that. They back everything up all the time. We can go over here and actually take a look at the key that's generated. We can see there's the key ID, but status, pending import. so you don't have access to it. There's literally nothing you can do here to decrypt this content. So pretty scary, in terms of like the potential of these types of attacks. And this is just S3. There's a lot of other iterations you do for the databases, for various other cloud services. I mean, Amazon itself, has anyone here looked at how many just APIs Amazon has that you can interact with? Anyone want to take a guess? Throw some numbers out. Oh, close, yeah. Yeah, I think like last I looked it was like 7,500 or something like that. Like, it's crazy. And then that's the documented ones. So pretty crazy, right? Now, we did write a recovery script for this. The thing is, it only works if you have the keys. So it's not like one we could just go recover for people impacted by this. You have to have those keys. But this basically takes all the content, decrypts it, and moves it back to the original bucket. But in essence of time, I'm going to skip past like looking at the details of that, but I just wanted to highlight, just how easy some of these attacks are and, the devastating impact that they can have. Which brings me to kind of the main point of this talk, like what I really want to focus on here is the fact that so many of these things are just very accessible to people nowadays. Like when a lot of us were coming up in this industry, we didn't have much. Like we had to go find people. We had to prove ourselves to get into inner circles with people. We couldn't just Google things. We couldn't go onto these forums and just download things and run them without having any clue what was happening. Nowadays, that's exactly what happens. People just go out there and they're like, I want to hack X. And they're like, here's how you do it. Here's the YouTube tutorial. And they just have access to all these things. And it's really lowered the bar to entry. And this has had a significant impact on cybercrime itself. But instead of talking about, how, some of those tools and stuff, because a lot of us, see Cobalt Strike and all those kind of things. They're very readily accessible. This is one I like highlighting because it shows, the impact that minimal amounts of data on these forums can have in the wrong hands. So anyone remember the EA hack about a year ago? Pretty devastating. The real kicker behind this is that they were able to gain access to EA directly by purchasing cookies from an online forum for $10. So pretty successful purchase for these adversaries. So what they did was they bought cookies which gave them access to an employee's Slack account. And so basically the way it works is with the Slack profile, you can load that and it basically emulates the the individual that the profile was stolen from. So you can just go on as them. And if your company doesn't have these sessions timing out, which most companies don't, how often do you have to re-log into Slack, right? Most people don't have to at all, it just persists. So the attackers were able to get in there, and then they socially engineered the internal IT folks to give them more access into the company. And from there, they were able to gain access to the source code for FIFA 21. And a real interesting thing with that, if you get into the cybercrime scene, there's a whole underground cybercrime scene around FIFA coins because you can make actual real money from those. And so they also found out a way to generate FIFA coins by having the source code. So, additional insult to injury here, but also they had the full source code. They tried selling it. I don't think anyone actually bought it because they're like, why did I buy source code for FIFA? But still, devastating public impact for EA, devastating impact for those, all those people affected. But all it cost them was $10 on a cybercrime forum and just a little creativity and time. But we've talked quite a bit about, general cybercrime. I want to talk about something more fun. This is a toy. Anyone here have one of these? Yeah, nice. See, it's scary in here, right? Look at all this stuff we could mess with. So I brought mine too. I promise I'm not going to mess with things. But for those of you that don't know what this is probably my new favorite toy for a lot of reasons, because it just has so many tools built into it. basically a software-defined radio, has RFID, reader-writer, NFC reader-writer. It can do infrared, has I button, USB, HID, so you can plug this in and execute attacks. All sorts of different things. There's a GPIO board where you can do Wi-Fi stuff with it. I mean, it's just like lots of potential. And the reason I think this is so impactful, like a lot of these tools have existed for a long time. We have various like Proxmark, where you can go clone HID cards and stuff like that. We have the HackRF, where you can do a lot of the sub-1 gigahertz kind of attacks. But not everything is included in one tiny little package like this that all of us can just put in our pockets and do very nefarious stuff with, that has a very open community that's constantly updating things too. Like I was just looking at this yesterday, and they have an entire database of all the amiibos. So my son loved that. It's like, hey, you want that one? Let's just load it. And as this community is being built out, there's going to be a lot more codes that are added to this. A lot of these you don't even have to intercept the transmissions in order to replay them, because people are sharing these online. There's all sorts of scripts tied to this as well. I actually wrote a script, which I'll show you here in a bit, which is kind of scary. But there's tons of capabilities in here that allow people that have no clue how this stuff actually works to just download these things, put it on their flipper, and run it, which is super fun. My wife hates it, by the way, and I'll show you why. So this is one of the scripts I wrote. I actually did this just the other day. But basically, you hear of Open Sesame. There's like a tool where you could basically brute force garage door codes. Well, so I just put one of those on the flipper, and I was trying this out at my house, and it works very well and extremely fast. So we'll just execute, boom, opens. The part I didn't show here is it actually opened my neighbor's door too. So I was like, and the fun thing is some of these you can't undo, like you can't close with some of the things I'll show you in a bit. But the thing is, I mean, this kind of tool in the hands of someone with nefarious purposes is extremely scary, right? Because all of a sudden they just like download this thing and they can go break into someone's house. And there's a lot of other protocols it interacts with. Anyone here see how these play with Teslas? This is my favorite part. This is why my wife hates it. So check this out. And so Teslas, they have the sub 1 gigahertz codes for the charge ports. So basically when you push the button, it opens the charge port. Well, now you can just go walk by a Tesla, hit the button, pop their charge port. Pretty fun, right? It's kind of scary in the wrong hands though, because you could go up, pop the charge port, and like pour water in there or something. If someone wanted to really mess with someone. For me, I've just been riding around on my longboard and like popping Teslas, and it's just funny. It's just like super funny to me. I know, I'm still a child, but the scary part, so say we want to be more impactful with this, right? Well, Teslas, I don't know how many of you know this, but it doesn't use like a normal fob, like cars. You can capture key fobs too for cars, except most modern cars use rolling codes, so you're not going to be able to replay it and actually get in. Older cars, some of them it will work. But the Tesla card is just an NFC card, so we can clone it. So with that, you can actually emulate it. The problem is I haven't actually been able to get into the car with it yet. I don't know if it's something I'm doing wrong or it doesn't have, it's not actually doing an additional component that's missing here. So that's good. At least you can't completely clone this key and get in. Because you think about when you go and have a valet park your car, well, what if they just clone your card key and then you want to steal it? And then the other interesting thing with Teslas recently, you can't do really Bluetooth attacks with this, but I'm sure everyone saw the Bluetooth key replication attack with Teslas, because you just come near one and it picks up the signal from your phone. Now all you need is someone with a receiver near you in the building, just replaying that to someone outside, and they can steal your car. Although all of this said, I wouldn't mess with a Tesla because it records all angles at all times. So you're definitely going to get caught, but still interesting. But this is another one I found interesting too. So when you get credit cards, you get a new credit card in the mail and they send it in a little envelope. Well, if someone just wants to steal your credit card from your envelope. You know, you could. This actually works from quite a distance away too, with some cards. But there's scripts that are run as well on top of this. So not only can we emulate the code, which you can see here, we could go replay this code, but we can actually get the full credit card number as well. Blanked it out for obvious purposes, but pretty scary, right? You know, if you leave NFC enabled on your phone, you could do the same sort of attack, just bumping into somebody. So pretty impactful. Again, no skill required. I didn't write anything to do this. It's just built in and just very easy to do. And shredding credit cards, right? Oh yeah, it's good. Card's shredded. You can't get any data off of it. Well, as long as that chip is still intact, you can still read the data. So one more thing for us to worry about, you know, when you shred your card and you know, making sure that you actually destroy those electronic components within the card as well, or else someone could still get your credit card. So pretty scary, right? These kind of tools in the hands of someone nefarious could be relatively impactful. Now this one kind of freaked me out a bit. You know, we recently went on a Disney cruise, and to do anything on the cruise, you have these wristbands, and that's how you pay for things. That's how you know, get in and out of things. You can check into your room with it and stuff like that. The real scary part is, so on the cruise, they had an area where you can drop your kids off, and they go run around and stuff, and it's protected. You know, they have a thing where you have to check in with one of these, and it just verifies that you're the parent of this child. Well, what if someone clones one of these and, you know, has bad intentions? Pretty scary, you know, especially because you can read and write with this. You could write it to another wristband that looks like this, go check in. Pretty terrifying kind of stuff. And the thing is, this is where everything's headed. Everything's headed to these touchless kind of payments and things like that. So these kind of tools, you know, it's a toy, really, but very impactful in the wrong hands. So lower the bar, right? It's easy to be a criminal these days. Cyber criminal 101. You know, there's not much of a bar really for a lot of these kind of devastating attacks. But for me, I just like using it as a toy. Like my friends and I clone all their pool keys so we can get in all the pools in the area and stuff, which is fun. You know, this was a super fun when we were out at lunch. About a week or two ago, and I was just messing with this. So you can, it has a RF. So I was trying to change one TV because there was a game on and all these people were super invested, and so I was like, oh, this will be funny. I didn't realize it would change all of the TVs except one. So I put on like a movie and all these people started booing, and it was great. I'm just sitting there like putting it back in my pocket. So I mean, there's two avenues, right? Like I tend to try and be on the harmless side, but still pretty impactful in the wrong hands. But you know, with that, you know, I think with this crowd, I don't want to try and tell you anything you don't know. I just want to say, like, you know, even with all the stuff we're kind of facing right now with the economy, the war, like all these things, right? Like, you know, just all of us in here need to really try and do what we can to make a positive difference, and you know, try and help people not fall victim to some of the things we talked about today. And I think part of that's just the understanding that, like, you know, what's capable and you know what you know, with the risks that are out there. And so with that, you know, thank you all very much, and welcome to BSides Boulder. It's exciting. No, and I think I have time for questions. Yeah.
Time for questions.
Oh, perfect. If anyone has any questions.
Ethically speaking, go ahead. Theoretically, how many of them
Ooh, so like for like RDP access and stuff like that, yeah, I'd say quite a bit of them. You know, Showdown's pretty good at mapping out and like giving a good number like hosts that are available and things like that. There are some things you could do to correlate and figure out like more which assets might be affected. That's kind of the nice thing. Some of these forums actually give you a lot of information. There's one I didn't show on here, but one of them actually, they specialize in compromising websites, and they actually give you the websites that are compromised. It's just listed in the forum. All you have to do is log in to access those. So that's one that we scrape and we cross-compare with customers. So if we have a customer show up in there, we can proactively notify them. But yeah, I mean, I'd say it's a pretty direct correlation with what's available on Shodan. Oh. Yeah.
You could fight one duck-sized horse or 100 duck-sized horses. Which would you pick?
If I could fight one duck-sized horse or 100.
One horse-sized duck.
Ooh, man. I don't know. I think I'd take my chances with the one. Man, anyone here been bit by a duck? That hurts. It sucks bad, man. And the big one, I don't know. I feel like I could maybe run away or something. But I don't know. That's a good question. I like it. Yeah.
For these marketplaces, are you seeing a lot of them on like the dark web or the ClearNet? Because I know Raid Forums was on the ClearNet. I'm curious like what the majority of them you're seeing, like where those are.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, So the question is, are a lot of these marketplaces that we're investigating on the darknet or the ClearNet? And the answer is actually the ClearNet. Like a ton of these are very brazen, very just open. You don't have to use Tor to access them. Like most of the forums are going to be on the Clear. They do have Tor addresses as well, but most of them are just directly accessible. Now, when you get into like some of the scarier forums, those are definitely dark web. That's the kind of stuff where like when you have to be invited, those kind of things. There's a trick there too. So since we have time, I'll tell you my little trick for this. One of the things I do when I try and get into the forums that are restricted and you have to have a vouch or you have to be a known contributor or something, well, a lot of them have very bad security of their sites, so you can oftentimes index the users. So that's one of the things I'll do is I'll find all the usernames, and then I go to the Clear forums and I do a cross compare, and I sort them by reputation and posts and things like that. So I can go and see, okay, who has a good reputation on this forum, but they don't have an account over here. And then I just go to that site and I say I'm that person. I reference their blogs. And like they don't check anything. They just like let you in. So that's one trick you can use. And it works like surprisingly well for like all these hackers that are very anonymous and whatnot. But yeah, a lot of it's just very clear and in the open. And like raid forums, just perfectly out there in the open. That was one of the sites, because it was the one I was scraping, of course. But the fun thing is they just had an RSS feed. So like you don't have to log in or anything, you just have it send you the updates from the site. So a lot of these sites will do that as well. And especially the ones that are operated more by like the teenagers and stuff that we see who are getting rolled on eventually.
Do you have any recommendations for best practices related to your data, like how to collect and the tool sets that you utilize?
Yeah, so that's a good question, actually. And I think I have a slide in here. I wasn't sure on time, so I pulled this one out. But this is kind of the high-level setup I've been running with in terms of like scraping data from these kind of things. The main thing is like just not touching anything directly. Everything you want to do, you want to go through a VPN of some kind to at least have some layer of abstraction. Most of these I do hit through Tor as well. But in general, you can see kind of the breakdown here. I use time-based event bridge to trigger when I run these scripts and trigger the scraping. But essentially, they all operate in kind of the same way. They'll go out and hit hacking forums, marketplaces. We hit all the ransomware leak sites as well. We also hit various chat groups, so like Telegram, Discord. We go into various IRCs. There's a funny one. One IRC we broke into, once we started chatting with some of the guys in there, they found out not who we were, but they found out we were not in their little group, and they figured we were security researchers, and they actually gave us their resume. Just like, it was weird, and like he showed his GitHub and stuff, and I was like, dude, like. It was weird, and it was funny. From there, we were able to get to their Instagram and found a bunch of crazy stuff. Like they had like pictures of them doing drugs and stuff on there, and just like, man, like what do these people do? Like where you don't get in trouble for this kind of stuff. Like I guess there's a very high bar you have to hit to show up on the Fed's radar. But yeah, in general, so we do a lot of scraping of those. I use a combination of Selenium. I use various Lambda functions. We also have RSS feeds. Really depends on what we're targeting and scraping, how we're going to pull from. I always try and go for the easiest first. So like most of them just have an RSS feed. That's my favorite. But in general, all of it's coming through at least a VPN, to make sure we're not giving away who we are and things like that. Then we store everything in S3, process it. We also cross-compare with our other threat intel providers. The reason I do this is we find a lot of data before the threat intel providers will let us know about it because they do that curation component. So a lot of that too, we'll sit on it and wait and see if they validated it because they have a lot more insight than we do into this stuff. But for us, it's like if we want to quickly find out about major breaches or new cloud accounts for sale, that's kind of why we do it this way. But the threat intel providers, they're very good at enriching this data and giving more context around it and verifying that it's something legitimate. But then we pipe it out to, we have our own threat feeds that we push it to. We gather metrics, which we kind of talked about briefly, within the reports and things. But then we also have the alerts that we showed, piping into Slack when interesting stuff shows up. And so that's kind of the high level of how we do some of this collection. But yeah, the main thing is just don't touch anything in the clear and set up wholly separate like email accounts and Jabber addresses and things like that to do any sort of communication. And also with Telegram, you can tie Telegram to burner phone numbers. So that's what we do there too. So you don't want anything tied back to anything like actually associated with your identity.
One final question, this is kind of your opinion on stuff. When it comes to the pervasivity of all this open source stuff, and it's so easy to do these things. There's dedicated real nation state hackers, there's all this stuff. Which one currently do you think actually has a bigger sway on the security industry? Is it the vast the vast quantity of this happening? Or is it more like the individual targeted, highly specialized attack? Which one do you think kind of weighs out more heavily currently for a business and then also just for the world in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. So weighing, who is more impactful, I think, in terms of like, say, a nation-state adversary or crime-war groups, I would say there's kind of two sides to it, right? If you're talking to marketing, then of course nation-state, they're all Russia, China, that kind of stuff. But the reality of it, I would say truly most impactful would be crime-war groups. Because it's profit-driven, opportunistically motivated, and they're just going after any avenue to make money, which really makes them kind of a scary adversary because they don't care who they target, they don't care who they hurt, and it's something we're more likely to be hit by than, say, a nation-state. Nation-states are definitely going to go after you if you have more of that sensitive data. Like back to this slide, like a lot of these folks tend to look at it that way, right? Like, oh, we don't have data Russia would be interested in, right? But even so, I think nation states might target them for infrastructure. Because, all the people saying, oh, just block Russia, your firewalls and stuff. Cool. When's the last time they've directly touched anything in America? Never. Like, they always proxy their traffic. And so, that's why I think it really comes back to protecting yourself against the basic crimeware is where I think people should really focus initially. Because right now we're doing a terrible job at that too. So.
How much of your data capture through that process would you say involves the usage of Selenium?
Oh, so how much of the data capture do you capture through Selenium? I'd say probably 75% of it or so. Because they actually do purchase things like Cloudflare and stuff like that, which are very good at blocking bots. And so we have to find ways to act as much like an actual person when visiting those sites as possible. Because if you just hit them with your basic bots and stuff like that, and you have Python in your user agent string, you're going to get blocked immediately. But if you're using a real browser and you do things like have add-ons, you make sure JavaScript's enabled. There's all sorts of steps I've gone through to kind of make sure those things are in place. Just because I've run into blocking on various forums.
Check out Cypress.
Cypress?
Yeah, it's a full-blown test.
Oh,
On steroids.
oh, thank you. I'll definitely have to do that. So anything to make it easier. Well, with that, I think we're out of time. So thank you all very much.
All of the things, Sarah. Thanks for all the questions, guys. That was great. We got about 5 minutes-ish until the next talk. So if you want to head to the restroom, grab another drink, refill water, all of that great stuff. And then we'll be back in here. So thank you. Thank you so much.